Well, thanks for being with us again today. We've got moms back with us talking about their children and how they're growing up. Specifically, we're going to talk about how they develop spiritually. So thanks for being with us today. Well, we've got, again, Brooke Chase is back with us. Y'all remember Brooke from previous shows. And now we've got Hannah Parker. I almost said Kennedy.
It wouldn't be the first time.
We changed the name on that.
I changed the name.
You did. You changed the name. I was there. Hannah is my daughter. Stacy and our daughter. So anyway, but they're here today. We had a great time with Brooke before talking about some things that parents are dealing with. And so we thought we'd bring Hannah into the mix.
Why not?
Why not?
Why not?
Why not? So we're going to talk about some more things. One of the things that you guys want to talk about today was the spiritual development of children, helping your kids grow spiritually. Mm-hmm. So what are y'all thinking about there?
Well, starting from the basics, how do you really explain a soul to a kid? How do you say your soul is what's inside of you? My 6-year-old looked at me like, you were messing this up, Mom. So I need a better answer on that.
So your 6-year-old asked you about the soul.
Yeah, how do you explain what your soul is?
Well, I think what you do is you explain what it is in simplest of terms and then see how they respond. I mean, the soul is the seat of your emotions, your will, your thoughts, all those things there. And they're not going to get all that.
Right.
So I think as parents, sometimes we expect their questions to be understandable answers. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they're just asking because they heard it somewhere. They don't really know. So you tell them and it'll stick. They'll come back to it and they'll learn again. But I think it's always about repetition.
Right.
And so it's the pressure on us as parents sometimes is that we have to answer this question.
Yeah.
I have to have an answer and I have to, or I may mess them up for all eternity. And sometimes it's just giving them the simplest answer at that time. And then as they grow, start building upon those things. So don't be so caught up in the pressure of having to give this perfect answer. You want to give the right answer, but it doesn't have to be necessarily perfect, and it doesn't have to be this full-blown theology lesson on the soul. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have to look for the moment. Well, it does play into discipline too. Recognizing, hey, did you think maybe I shouldn't do this? And two, kind of circling that back too. That was internal. You came up with that from your heart too. That was an internal, the right decision or the wrong one.
So when y'all are talking about discipline, all right, there's always these things about what works best. So I think, do y'all have conversations with your husbands about, hey, what discipline works best? Because there's different things. There are different kids respond differently to different disciplines and to how they responded. Mm-hmm. So, like if you're going to discipline your kids, of course, there's always that we spank, and didn't spank Hannah nearly enough.
Oh, please.
But we did. We had the spanky spoon and everything else. When I grew up, the spanky spoon was whatever was around. Mm-hmm. It could be a shoe, it could be a belt, it could be a 2x4 or whatever. That was back in the day. Today, you do that, you go to jail. Mm. So how do y'all determine if y'all thought about what your children, if you had to discipline, what's the one thing that, that works better than anything else?
Well, Mike and I have had this conversation all the time because we have young kids. Brooke and I, we both have a 5-year-old, but my youngest is 3. So she's you get spankings a lot more right now because you're finally to the understanding of what is right and what is wrong. The biggest thing that works is consistency. And Mike, if I say, okay, you do that one more time, you're going to get a spanking. And she does it one more time. If I don't give her a spanking, she knows that the next time I say, if you do that one more time, you're going to get a spanking. Oh, maybe she won't do that. So he gets on me all the time about empty threats and not carrying through with it. And I've caught myself doing it a whole lot less now. But consistency on what I say goes. And I don't have to get daddy. You will listen to me. I will spank you with a spanking spoon. And just, I think that is the biggest thing that's been hard. Because sometimes I don't want to spank them.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I said it, I got to do it.
Yeah. For
That's
sure.
a huge thing. Consistency, clarity, and correction. Discipline is about correction. I mean, there's the punishment aspect to it, but discipline is about correction. If they don't understand why they're getting spanked, then
Right.
they're getting punished. So that whole deal, and then the consistency thing is huge, is if you threat and then don't carry through, then they're going to push you to whatever line they think they can get to you.
Oh, yeah.
And then that's where they learn manipulation.
Yes.
Yep.
And they learn it quick.
Oh, yeah.
But I think they're born with it.
Oh yeah, well they are. I always tell them you don't have to train kids to do wrong. They come. That's standard operating procedure for their do that. You have to teach them to do right. Train up a child in the way they should go. So you have to train. So
Well, and it's kind of like lying. When you catch them lying, you know that they've gotten away with it once before because they did it once.
yeah,
So it connected like, oh, I got away with this once. I'm going to try it one more time.
yeah. And I think that's the time when parents, sometimes we get caught up in, we're scared we're going to traumatize our children. And we could do a whole show on this thing because the bar for trauma has been set so low now. Things that, and again, I'm always mindful that I say when I grew up versus now and stuff like that, because it sounds like I'm out of touch or whatever.
No.
But
It's not any different.
No.
it is different. But it's different because we made things different too.
Yeah, for sure.
There's always this generation that says, I don't want to raise our kids this way. And there's some things that, you do learn, but not everything was bad. There were some things that worked out really good, and there were some things that didn't. So we live in this world where we are so scared that we're going to break our kids. And they're much more resilient than we would ever give them credit for.
Yeah.
So I would say the damage of no discipline versus the damage of any discipline is much greater. It's much greater. I always tell people, they come up to me after I say something about how I discipline my kids. They go, I never had to spank my kids growing up. And I'm sitting there thinking, you send them to my house, give me 5 minutes.
Yeah.
We'll break that pattern.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of where we are. So when you're disciplining them, but discipline is key in development too. Because God disciplines us. And I think as we talk about discipline and development, God uses discipline in our spiritual development. He says, I discipline those I love. Every child of mine, I discipline.
Oh, yeah.
So discipline is birthed in love. It's a tool that God uses in our development. So it's a tool that we ought to, as parents, use in our development. So as we talk about spiritual formation and how that goes like that, so when you're thinking about developing your children spiritually, what does that look like for y'all?
Well, I think it goes back to, not depending on just the church to do it. Not bringing your kids to church and thinking, well, check, they're going to do it. You have to really act it out at home too and live it out at home. Let them see you praying together and also trusting too that you're not sinning by having questions or doubting.
Right.
Right.
I think that's the case. I mean, your kids they're going to ask questions. They're going to ask tons of questions about everything.
And helping them feel comfortable with it too. Knowing they can come and ask questions.
Yeah. But I think what you said is critical. It's a matter of, so what research is finding out, because we used to hear this stat out there, and it is real. 85% of kids walk away from church after they graduate high school. And so now they're starting to come back and find out, because a large portion of those started coming back into church too. But when people need to understand is when you hear 85% left church, that's less than 10% of our culture. So that's 85% of 10%. So it's not like there was this mass exodus. There wasn't a majority of people already involved in church to walk away from it. But what they're finding out from this group is that it's not necessarily what they heard, it's what they saw that turned them off from church. In other words, they'd see Sunday and they'd go to all these things right here, but yet they would watch mom and dad
Right.
Yep.
And if it didn't make a difference in mom and dad's life, why are we going? And so they made a decision. So why am I giving them this time on Sunday when it doesn't matter on Monday? Mm-hmm. So I think it's more than just plugging them into a church. They have to see that faith work in your life.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that's where it matters most, when they watch you guys live out your faith.
Well, Sunday morning rides aren't really the most like
Sunday mornings in general.
glorious.
Yeah.
But I think it's true to not like walk in and, say, all right, get in here, get a smile on your face.
Yeah.
Like walk in and be like, woo, we had a eventful morning.
We always have, because when I would leave, because we found out that me having the right mind in preaching that day would not start in what would happen at our house. Especially,
I tried to suggest that. Will did not go for it.
Especially with our kids were little, and Hannah and Ivy, and because we just knew we could have the greatest week in the history of weeks. I mean, great time, but when Sunday morning, and I believe it is a spiritual attack. It is that deterrent that the enemy understands, which is why I would say that's how you know the importance of gathering together is, because it's so attacked. Mm-hmm. And so Stacy and I came to this agreement, hey, I'm going to handle these kids. It works better without you here, because they work on the role divide and conquer. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, but that is, and watching that take place. But even now, I mean, y'all know, y'all been in class. I say, hey, listen, we're going to start at 9. And, y'all go, we can get here at 9 on something. And I always ask, what time you got to be at work?
Well, but this goes back to you didn't stay and get ready for church. You left and went to church, so you don't know. But we try to get here at 9. We're doing a lot better. Our Sunday school class is growing.
But you got to admit, on Sunday mornings, it all comes together.
It really does.
It is. And I think one of the things is, like, with kids seeing how you are in your home versus church and everything, it all comes back to when you mess up, you tell your kids I messed up. Don't think that, oh, I yelled at you. I have to ask you, even with Kennedy, I'm like, Kennedy, I'm so sorry I got mad at you and I yelled at you. Will you please forgive me? And that just sets the display of how our relationship with Jesus is, like how we should be, kind of thing. So,
Well, I think showing your kids that there's that, but at the same time, holding that strong line, just because I mess up once doesn't give you the right to doubt me in everything.
No.
And so you display that to teach them right behavior, but at the same time, they have to recognize that's not a license for them to show doubt. But at the same time, when you brought up a while ago, Brooke, about doubt and things like that, our kids are always going to struggle with things. They're going to doubt stuff. That's the nature of that. So it's not telling them that they shouldn't doubt, but it's explaining to them, hey, listen, doubt helps us understand something's wrong somewhere. It's a signal to help us, not something to scare us. Yeah. There's some things they should doubt.
Yeah, definitely.
That are healthy fears that they should doubt. But then there are things that God equipped us with this. I mean, Jesus would constantly challenge his disciples. Hey, listen, you need to build your faith. He would always say it. So if they weren't doubting, why would he have to say build your faith? Because they were struggling.
Right. And I think too, when the Bible calls us to love the God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul. And if you're creating some kind of questions in your head, it's showing your love for God. Like, no, I want to take this relationship to the next level. And that is something too of teaching your kids of, hey, you're learning more. You're taking your faith to the next step. And that's what you're supposed to do too.
Well, it's got to be practical for them. I mean, we sometimes get caught up in what we're teaching them, which is very important. But we really need to pay attention to what we're showing them.
For sure. Yeah.
Because that's where they see the integrity and the validity of it.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, to take me somewhere and teach me something and show me nothing, why does it even matter? But displaying that and putting it out there in an example, I get asked all the time, what would you change if you could go back and raise your kids again? I automatically say everything. I mean, there's so many things that I do differently. It just doesn't even do that way. And so I think having real conversations about real things in real time, you know, paying attention a little bit about that. And so I think those are all good, but that teaches them how to communicate too. I mean, the reason we have a generation that doesn't communicate well is because they don't know how to. Yeah. And so when you communicate real things to them in real time, it helps them understand relationships.
Well, and I think part of that, and we kind of touched on this earlier, was the technology piece. Is the technology, they get so comfortable behind those screens, and like even, I don't have older kids, so I can't say what I am going to do with, I've learned my lesson with saying what I am going to do and what I'm not going to do with my kids. But my hope is my children will not have a cell phone until they are able to drive. My parents did that to me, which cell phones weren't that popular before then, but I thought it was the world's worst. But I can already see it's going to be even worse for my girls because, I mean, 10-year-olds have a cell phone, and I definitely disagree with that. But like I said, I'm not going to say what I'm not going to do, but that is my hope. But I think that is the problem with communication these days, is because kids don't understand the importance of it, and the technology, screen time, TVs, that doesn't help. So how do us as parents say, we don't care, like swimming upstream? How are we supposed to help our kids swim upstream when all of this is going on?
Well, I think they have to see you swim upstream.
Yeah.
They have to see that in us, that we swim upstream, because if not, they're going to go, why are you asking me to do something that you don't do?
Right.
I watch how you act with your friends. I mean, you're not swimming upstream. And I think what matters is in this time frame that you guys are living in, you can have like-minded people with different ideas about how to do things. Again, when you go back to my generation, it was pretty clear. The basics were well known. Everybody was on board with it because we didn't have all the technology out there with so many options and things like that. But if you're going to swim upstream, I always say this: why do you have to swim upstream? If you're not sure where the current's going, you may not feel the need to have to swim upstream, because if you don't see the current as a threat, why would you go against it? And I think a lot of times parents don't necessarily see the current as a threat. They just think they need to teach their kids how to navigate the current and not necessarily go against it. You know, that you can be a part of this, but we don't do this. That there's this selective line that we don't cross. We know that it puts us in some awkward situations, but we're going to teach you how to navigate. And so sometimes it's almost like we're going to teach them how to navigate sin instead of how to overcome it. You know, we're to be in the world, not of the world. But they're going to learn from how you guys handle stuff. They're going to learn from how they see you respond to hard situations. When they're little, they may not recognize it much, but as they move into those middle school years, they're going to start paying attention, and they're going to push back. They're always going to push back. And that's where you kind of got to hold that line a little bit. And the greatest parenting advice that your mom, Stacy, and I ever got was from dear friends that we were watching them raise their kids, and they did a really good job. And we said, how in the world do you make decisions about your kids and where they go and what they do? He said, we tell our kids all the time, we trust them. But we also tell them we don't trust where we'd put you. You don't have the experience to deal with where you want to go. Not about trusting you. We don't trust that situation. And they sometimes would disagree about it, but we always remembered that that's what we tried to do. We tried to help you understand. It's not about not trusting you. You don't have everything you need to deal with what that situation would put you in.
Yeah.
And I think parents have to be okay with that. Parents have to understand that your responsibility is for that child, not for the children that are going to be there.
That's right.
But you've got to raise your child. And sometimes you're going to have people that will be there with you to encourage you. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're going to think you're being ridiculous. Sometimes you might have a friend that you think they're ridiculous, you know. But the thing is to find that which, hey, we believe this is a biblical principle. It's certainly a convictional principle. And so that's where we're going to land. And we know we're doing this because we love our children. We're not trying to keep them from experiencing joy or good times or anything else. We're just saying that the timing's wrong or the situation's wrong. And if we're uncomfortable with that, then you got to be okay with that. Because if you're not okay with that, they're going to watch. There's going to be a time when they're going to say, well, you remember when y'all did this? Because they're watching. Now, sometimes they're way out of line when they ask those questions, but other times they're watching. I think we way underestimate how much our kids watch us when we think they don't care what we're doing. Oh, they're watching you. They're great. They're great at playing it off, but they're watching you.
Well, and they're listening too.
Yes, they are.
It goes back to too with building their confidence. If my daughter were to hear me dogging on myself, she's going to fall right into that too.
Yes. Yeah. But I think those are deals. But when the fact that you're even conscious of what you're saying is a good thing. Being conscious of something versus being controlled by something, that's two different things. I want to be conscious of all the things that are out there, but I don't want to be controlled by the fear of it. I want to be conscious of it. I want to be aware of it, but I don't want to be controlled by it. And so I have a direction that I want to see they go in. There are two types of parents that always come up to me, and there's one parent that says, we did everything right, and our kids have just gone rebellious. And I go, well, that doesn't mess with me as much because of the garden.
Right.
Adam and Eve were in a perfect place with a perfect parent. That doesn't mess with me. What really blows my mind is that kid that was raised in a hellhole and now is being used by God to do some incredible things. That's the amazing thing, that God can overcome that. And they, being raised as they were so good. I understand rebelling against good. What blows my ever-loving mind is this kid who overcomes everything that should have destroyed him, which tells me as much as environment is important, we need to pay attention. Environment's not the final decision maker. And I think the parent that strives for perfection is the parent that's going to end up with the most chaos.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good
So
word.
It's not the deal of trying to be perfect parents as much as it is being godly parents. And so we need to understand that. Well, our time's getting away. So thanks for being with us today. Follow us, BuckyCandyMinistries.org on the webpage. Bucky Candy Ministries on social media. Hey, thanks for being with us. We'll see you again.
For more content like today's podcast, click right here. For sermons, click right here. And again, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Have a blessed day.